You're listening to the Mormon Theories podcast, and I'm your host, Ryan Hinckley. Hey guys. So, I'm a novice when it comes to Book of Mormon geography. Yeah, I know there are tons of theories out there, but I don't really know the details of any one particular theory all that well. I do know a bit about the South American model, though, after interviewing Ira Terry in episode 3. Check it out. Today, my guest will tell us even more about the South American theory. His name is Devon DowDell, and his father, the late Del DowDell, was an expert in the South American model. It was super fun talking to Devon. He was able to give a really cool perspective on his dad's work that we couldn't have gotten from anyone else. You won't want to miss this one. Please check out the show notes with links about things we talked about at mormontheories.wordpress.com. As you listen, please know that the views of my guests on the podcast do not necessarily reflect my own beliefs or the official doctrine of any denomination, including the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And with that, enjoy the show. Hey, Devon, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Ryan, I'm glad to be here. I'm really excited about talking to you today.
Yeah, me too. It's a real treat to have you with us. So
Thanks.
could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm not as interesting as what we're going to talk about, but I have 4 kids. My oldest daughter is a sophomore at BYU, Idaho. 2 kids in high school. My youngest is 11. He's got Down syndrome. And it's kind of an interesting mix with the 4 kids and all the experiences there. And my wife and I have been married 22 years now. We live in South Jordan, Utah.
Oh, congratulations.
Thanks.
Yeah. So for those listening, Devon's here to tell us about the South American model for the Book of Mormon geography. And he knows a lot. And so could you give us the 30,000 foot overview, as you like to call it, of this theory?
Yeah, let's clarify that a little bit though. My father, Del DowDell, who is the expert. He put 30 years into the research into this, probably around the 1990 to 1991, 92, somewhere right around there. He started getting really interested in it. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, you wrote my father and asked him if he'd come on. He'd been in poor health the last year and 3/4, and he had passed away he passed away January 12th of this year, of this month. Well, I guess it was last month now. But I saw you when I was going through, just catching up on all of his emails. I saw your email and said, hey, I'd love to come on and talk about it. I think like many people, I would love to spend all my time studying certain things, especially about the gospel. But I've got 4 kids. I have to work and pay for things. I have to go to dance classes, and I have to go to guitar lessons, and I have to go to baseball games, and I've got to make sure I take my wife on a date every once in a while so we don't end up in divorce. And the time I have to dedicate to this subject is a little lower than I'd like. And you and I will give a little insight to those listening are talking at 8 at night, so I'm sure this isn't your number one thing that you do all day either, so you can probably relate.
Yeah.
But I have been helping my father out. And my father has always been big on technology, but he was 85 going 86 when he died. And even though he was into technology, it was a little difficult for him to do a few things. So I was always trying to help him. One of the things we were getting is some videos onto YouTube. And so the last 10 years, I helped build my dad's websites and a few other things. I wish I could have spent a lot more time doing this, but on YouTube, we get a lot of non-fans leaving comments. And so I've been the responder to that. So I've about 10 years of responding to all the critics of his work. So it helped to get us, and we had a lot of conversations with it. So that's what I'm hoping I can shed some light on today. So yes, for the 30,000 view looking down at my dad's work. My dad's work is that Lehi landed in Peru. No, I'm sorry, Chile. La Serena, Chile, in Cucumbo Bay, a beautiful place right there. And in a very short time, they moved up north into Peru, probably the Cusco, Peru, That'd be around where the city of Nephi was. And through 2,000 years, and the population has migrated with the northern migration of Hagoth ships through the northern foot migration from South America to Mesoamerica, Central America to America, to what we'd call the Heartland and everything else. So I like to say that because, and set it out there because people will talk to me about things that happen in the Heartland, say this disproves your dad's understanding, and it doesn't. My dad never said that nobody ever went up north, and actually it's part of his work. So
Hmm.
it's good to just clarify that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first of all, I just want to give my condolences for your dad, his passing.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
thanks. He would love to come on, but he had a little lung cancer. That's not what killed him. A stroke
mhm,
killed him. But he talking in the last year and a half, his mind was always strong, but talking would have been very difficult. He'd be coughing a lot, so he had
mhm.
to. I was trying to get him into this technology, but it's been real rough. But thank you for that.
Yeah, and thanks for responding to my email.
Yeah.
I'm really happy that you responded and that we could have this discussion. So I'm curious how how did your dad get so involved in this model? What was kind of the driving force there?
That's a really good question. On the negative things, I get a lot. People say, "Hey, you need to study other things," and I find it funny because nobody starts in the South American understanding of it. I don't think anybody started in the South American understanding of it since the 1850s or 60s. My dad showed me some work where some people did back then. Um, Growing up, my father was always really into scriptures and understanding them left and right, but he didn't get into location and his interest there until about 1990. He met a man called in our ward down in Placentia, California. His name was Art Cokerhans. I hope I'm saying Art's last name right. And my dad was giving a lesson. My dad was often a teacher um, in gospel doctrine. Almost everywhere he went, they made him a gospel doctrine teacher. He was a bishop in the early 70s. But my dad was talking, and you know, in the early 90s, where I was, I don't know about everywhere in the church, but the only thing anybody ever talked about was the Mesoamerican theory, the Central American theory.
Hmm.
Okay. And my dad was just talking about scriptures as if it happened there. And Art took him aside afterwards and said, Dell, I just got to tell you, that's not where this happened. My dad's like, I think it did, Art. And through that, Art opened him up to some of the things that would make someone think it could be in somewhere else, and especially South America. My dad would say that Art would say, do you believe in Joseph Smith? And my dad says, yes, I love Joseph Smith. I believe in Joseph Smith. And he says, okay, every word in the Book of Mormon is very important, okay? And it means what it says. And that's how you have to interpret it. And if you follow the words, it's going to lead you to aspects that they talk about of the land, where they landed and what happened. And my dad was fascinated by that. He got an 1828. This is really good for people listening. A very good tool. The 1828 Webster Dictionary is the first dictionary with the American language, not the European language. And that's 1828. It's published. What happens in 1830? The Book of Mormon is published. So if you really want to know the words when Joseph Smith is using the translation of what he knows in English, it's really good to use the 1828 Webster's Dictionary. And I'm telling you, in a year, about 180 years, a lot of English words don't mean exactly the same. So
Hmm.
our time to go through a fine-tooth comb over every verse and every word, and he felt that led to the South American understanding.
Wow, that's super interesting.
Yeah.
Um, I just got to say, I have seen the 1828 Webster's Dictionary, and it's amazing.
Hmm.
You can find it
Yeah.
online pretty easily. So cool. Um, so Nephi, let's talk a little about Nephi and the sailing currents and how would those have taken him right to, what did you say, 30 degrees in Chile, or how
Yeah,
does that
third
work?
degrees. The parallel. You originally were talking about Frederick G. Williams writing down the latitude and longitude, which is the Cucumbo Bay and La Serena in Chile.
Yeah.
Um, what my dad liked the information came from Frederick G. Williams, but it's not a proven fact. Where that came from, there's, I mean, it's on a very important documentation, but it's a note on the back. It's along with some Hebrew. It was probably from the Hebrew was probably from School of the Prophets. They had some Jewish people come in and work with some Hebrew with them, and one other thing. But that, when you're talking about where someone lands, they need a area to land in. I was just reading a book about Shackleton, and when Shackleton, I don't want, if no one knows, but he was trying to find land on an island that they were amazingly navigated towards, and they're dying after being days upon days with no rest. But they can't just land right away. They have to find a place that's sheltered, because if they tried to land on this island, they would just be crushed against the rocks and everything. Where Frederick G. Williams points to, and understand this is somewhere in the 1830s, 1840s, is a perfect place for landing. That's an odd coincidence, but what my father's work was with the currents, and mainly what is said in the Book of Mormon. The boat that Nephi built was blown forth before the wind. And there's an understanding that tacking, I don't know how much you know about sailing, but tacking is where you can go anywhere you want. That's not understood at the time. You'd have to go where the wind and where the sea current is. And that's the best understanding. And that my dad spent a lot of time, years, studying that, on how the currents and wind could take you from where they left to where they landed in La Serena.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the currents and stuff is not something that I went deep down dive in. He spent a lot of time on it, but he is following the scripture, and that's another thing. Is blowing before the wind. People want to talk about other ways, but you would have to be able to use tacking with a sailboat to do it. Now, some of the people that would not like my dad's work would say, "Hey, maybe God showed them how to tack. Maybe they did." I mean, it's not mentioned anywhere though.
Yeah. So if Nephi just left the place in the Middle East, wherever it was, and just let the wind blow him, it should have taken him right to 30 degrees. Is that what you're saying? 30 degrees south?
Yes.
Awesome.
With my dad's work on currents and wind patterns, yes.
Okay.
And that would take you, my dad's course would be coming out of the Sea of Arabia, going in between like India and Australia. I'm doing this from my memory right here.
Yeah.
And coming up on the west side of Chile, down at the bottom, taking the Humboldt Current up to the latitude that talked about by Frederick G. Williams, and into the Bay of Cucumbo Bay in La Serena. He's got a lot of work on that in his book, Nephi Never Saw Mesoamerica, and on his blog, nephicode.blogspot.com. That would go into detail. Unfortunately, he spent years studying those.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. I know that he did some work on also correlating some other things, like the environment where they landed. Like what does the Book of Mormon say about that, and how does it match up with that spot?
Yeah, there's 5 attributes that he pulls out of I think it's First Nephi chapter 18 verse 24. And I know most things I'm going to be paraphrasing instead of exact.
Yeah, that's fine.
Books, but the 5 aspects would be the living conditions that they needed to where they landed. That would include the bay as well as just the physical conditions. Good soil to grow, the climate, forest where they had domestic and wild animals very close by is mentioned, and ore. Now, right there in La Serena is they're in a Mediterranean climate. The Mediterranean climate is the same climate as Jerusalem is. In Southern California, the only other one on the West Coast is Southern California, where I grew up. So my dad spent 3/4 of his life in a Mediterranean climate, and I don't know if you've ever lived in one, but it's pretty amazing. That when they said that they brought their seeds and everything that they need to grow, and they planted and growed right away, the best match for that is a Mediterranean climate.
Right.
from Mediterranean climate to Mediterranean climate. For instance, if you take, we get a lot of the haters or people that disagree with us, like to argue this, but believe me, I've planted anything you want to plant in a Mediterranean climate and it goes great. And I've tried to plant stuff in a different climate and it's not always as easy. And so that's one of the big deals. Able to stop La Serena is great. It's got fresh water. You could live right off the bay. And it's got ore. Chile is one of the largest producers of ore, which is gold, silver, copper, in the world. And then lots of animals, wild and tame animals.
Wow.
So right there. So
yeah,
my dad felt that matched better than anywhere else, including the Mesoamerica and especially the Heartland theory.
Yeah. So just really quick, back to Frederick Tree Williams.
Mm-hmm.
So this figure of 30 degrees comes from him. And would he have known back then that that was such a great spot? Like, did they have maps that he could have
Okay,
consulted?
well, and Frederick Tree Williams is a really interesting character. I've grown to love him.
Uh-huh.
He was a super important guy. He was Hamilton to Washington. He was that to Joseph Smith, I think. He was his right-hand man, and he was loyal to him to the end. But Frederick Tree Williams is very fascinating because in the Battle of 1812, he is on the in the lakes. I'm sorry, but the Great Lakes,
Mm-hmm.
and he is in the Navy, and he helps win in a very important battle. He's not a captain or anything, but he's an important part of the ship. So he, of anybody probably around Joseph, knew sailing and everything pretty good. Now, in 1830, maps and understanding of the bottom of South America, where Chile is, it's hard to say, but you would think that he had very little access to that. But if someone's going to get a revelation and about latitude and longitude and anything about the sea and the sea and where a bay is, it might be Frederick G. Williams because of his knowledge of sailing.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, I would imagine even if they had a map, it wouldn't necessarily show the details that it would be such a great landing spot, but I don't know
It's
too much.
it's hard to know. I mean, we got the
Yeah.
internet now. It's kind of hard to figure out that La Cumba Bay is a great place to sail today.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you or your dad ever visit that spot?
My dad had been to Peru. I have we have never he'd never been to La Serena in Chile, but luckily we've had numerous missionaries come back from there and
Oh,
talk to them.
cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. So you've mentioned something about a Book of Mormon cure for malaria. Is that?
Oh yeah, that's great. It's not in the 5 things mentioned right there, but a little bit later on.
Uh-huh.
Um, let's see. I wish I remembered who was talking about it. I think it was Alma 4640. So in Alma, talking about the resources in the area that helped cure people, and one of them is not much fell to fever because of the great things that could relieve the fever. And there is the only natural cure for malaria that we know of is found only in Peru Andes Mountains. It is quinine. I'm sorry. And quinine is the bark of the conchilla tree, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And you can ground this bark up. The natives would put it in a drink, and it would cure malaria. And when the Spanish came in 1520 some 1530s, they were being decimated by malaria, and they had made friends with locals, and they showed them this. And then later on, the Spanish helped bring it back to Europe, and that helped cure a lot of famous people. And then it was finally brought out to Dutch Indian and planted there. And what's interesting I know this is a little thing, but the same attributes from this were used for the the HQC that was the big. Uh, it was the controversy thing that might help COVID-19.
Uh,
It comes from the original source of this tree.
is that the hydroxychloroquine or something like
Yeah,
that?
that's it. Yeah, HQC. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that comes from the synthesized version of this tree's bark. Very
Wow.
fascinating. Yeah.
Th-
But it's the only natural cure for malaria that we know of. And it only comes from the Andes Mountains in the Peru.
Wow. Very interesting. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, cool. So, so the people that lived in that area in Peru in the Andes Mountains were the Inca. Is that right?
What we know today is the Inca, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So, do you think that the Nephites were the Inca, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's kind of interesting because when my dad first started doing this studying, I'm going to normal school. I've gone to learn about the Aztec and the Inca, and my dad said, "Well, the Inca didn't build any of that," and I was like, "Dad, that's not what my school is saying right now." And he says the Inca they didn't build that. I thought that was one of his more controversial positions for a while, but now it's common science actually for anybody that wants to get past the original narrative. Um, yeah, there's non-LDS people like Graham Hancock. I don't know if you ever followed his work.
Yep.
He's got a lot on YouTube. There's another gentleman, man, I wish I remember his name, but his is just in Peru, and he's not LDS.
Hmm.
And talking about the people before the Inca. What really drove me to understand that the Inca weren't the ones that built everything in Peru is when the Spanish came to them. One, they said they didn't build it. Two, they didn't know how to build it. Okay, the technology is a lost technology. So, in my dad's understanding, is the Inca would be Lamanites that took over cities that the Nephites built. Now, they might have built on top of those, but that the Nephites had been wiped out, and the technology that built most of these amazing places was Nephite technology, and it was pre-Inca.
Okay.
And that could be a controversial thing, but if anybody does any deep study, anybody that studies is going to point out normal history says Inca built it all, but Inca don't know how to build it. So it was the people before him.
Gotcha. Very interesting.
He would say the
Okay.
same thing about the Aztecs
Yeah.
in,
So that,
in, in Central America.
okay. What do you think about the Aztecs then? Do you think those were
He would
Nephites as well, moving
he would
north,
he'd
or
say he would say they're well, okay. The Aztecs that we know are Lamanites, but what they built was not Aztec built. He would say that it was Nephite built.
they just took it over
Yeah, they
later?
just take it
Okay.
over. And
Gotcha.
again, it would go to that they didn't possess the technology to build those things.
Right.
When the Spanish got there, the Aztec didn't know how to rebuild those. When my dad told me this, I thought, Dad, you're gone over the cliff. I'm a teenager. I'm going through the studies. But Tony, anybody wants to do a deep dive, especially on YouTube, it's not a Mormon thing. The Aztec, especially the Inca. Okay, maybe Aztec might be a little more controversial, but the Inca did not build what our modern day science says they built.
Oh, interesting. Okay. That's cool. So there's always the question though when we're trying to match up people with the Book of Mormon people's is DNA, is there any DNA matches between the people down there
Yeah,
and what you would
my
expect?
dad didn't love the DNA question because my whole life, whenever science wasn't super strong with what Joseph Smith talked about, my dad would say, "Well, you just need to wait around long enough because science. I mean, it's not that science changes; it's just our understanding of what we come to is changed." And so the reason why I bring that up is in the middle '90s, we had quite a few people around us that left the church over DNA science. And my dad said, "Look, Devin, you just gotta wait around. This is just how things work. Sometimes you get some negative stuff, some positive, but in my life, whenever Joseph Smith has said something, it's always worked out right. And just because science is saying it not now, you just haven't lived long enough." And every time I've placed this on something, it's always come true. Well, my dad's theory was I don't want to do a deep dive into science, right? Well, not science. I'm sorry, that's not the correct word. DNA, because he doesn't feel the whole DNA story has been told yet. Okay, So we're looking at what we understand DNA at right now, and what he's saying is as it evolves, we might know a little bit more in 30 years. So I don't want to place all my understanding of it now. And I believe President Hinckley had something very similar, like, we don't know everything we're going to know about this right now. But that said, in 2008, I am into this study. Okay, my dad didn't spend much time with DNA. Okay, but there is a peer-reviewed study that came out. I think it was called the Six Founding Mothers of 2008, March of 2008. Very fascinating study. You need to listen to what they discover and what they come up with, not what their conclusions are, okay? Because you got non-religious people making conclusions. Their conclusions isn't science in this. The science, though, is that mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA, is passed on from mother to child is the best way to track someone that we know of today. And I don't know if anything's going to change in the future. I'm not a DNA specialist, but that they've from the top of Canada to the bottom of South America, the sample of all Native Americans that they have, the large sample group, 95% of them did not come from Asia. They don't know where the mitochondrial DNA came from. They have a belief of where they think it is, which is hogwash. I mean, but the school books, you go to college right now, they're still telling you it came from Asia. The DNA evidence that's very fascinating is they have no idea where the DNA came from for the Americas. So does that support Joe Smith? I'd say 100% it does. Does it support the Book of Mormon? I'd say 100% it does. So that's a little bit what I would add to it. Very fascinating study, 2008, Six Founding Mothers. Don't listen to their conclusion because they make up a land that there is no proof about that they came from, mythical land, and they call us crazy. They call us anti-science. But the Native American, and it's not just Indian, but what we call Native Americans in America, we're talking about South America, Mesoamerica, and Canada. Their mitochondrial DNA does not match Asia, and they don't know where it came from.
Wow, that is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a biologist or a geneticist by
Yeah.
any means, but it's
I'm not the expert either, but I did study this study as well as I can for a layman in DNA.
yeah. And it's my understanding that the mitochondrial DNA only passes like from mother to daughter or
Yeah.
something like that.
Everyone I've asked since I studied this in 2008 says it is the way to track it. It is the best way we know to track it right now.
Yeah. And that's very interesting. And I've also heard other people say that like we don't know what type of DNA that the Nephites would have had coming in, and so it's kind of hard to track that. Or do you agree?
Well, we don't know everybody that was in blood lineage of what was in Lehi's party.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we can make assumptions. Now, there's another interesting fact, and I apologize that I don't have the scripture memorized, but God changes the Lamanites. The Lamanite, now a lot of people get very very upset and argumentative, but how do you change how somebody looks? I mean, my understanding is it's their DNA. Okay, I don't know what controls that other than DNA, but I'm not a scientist. But Lamanites, they wipe out the Nephites. So if they don't know where the mitochondrial DNA came from, did it come from that? Now, look, this is all speculative, but it's very interesting. I mean, there's hidden things in the Book of Mormon that are very fascinating. How do you change how somebody looks? I mean, that'd be a big question.
Yeah.
I mean, we think God's omnipotent. He's Alpha and Omega. My understanding of God is He can change our DNA with the flick of his finger. I don't limit God's power in any way, but I don't know if that's what happened. But it's kind of a fascinating thing to think about.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Very fascinating. Okay.
DNA. One other thing though is we might get into this a little bit later, but the Hopi Indian or DNA is talked about a lot, and people that like to challenge my dad's work will say, well, the Hopi Indian DNA matches the Nephite DNA. To me, the 2008 study covers all the Americas, where the Hopi is just a very, very small amount. But remember, this is why I laid out my dad's understanding. if there's anything that's Nephi DNA or any DNA related to Lehi in the Americas, it goes along with my dad's understanding of how things happened. Now, if you said that they landed in only where the Hopi are and only were there the whole time, that'd be different. But I mean, my ancestors landed in New York in the 1700s. We got DowDell DNA all over the United States. It wouldn't tell you where we landed if you found it 2,000 years later in Utah.
Right.
I mean, that's my point. Is my dad's not saying that with the northern Hagoth ships and the northern migration in the Book of Mormon, Lehi's the DNA trail goes all the way up into the Americas.
Yeah. And I think that's an important point that people don't stay put. And even in the Book
Yeah,
of Mormon, it talks about migrations happening. So
yeah.
it's a very, very good point. Um, so I wanted to ask you, because I heard about like a Great Wall of Peru or something. I wondered if you knew anything about that and if it fits into the
I,
theory.
I don't know. I don't know the Great Wall of Peru, but I think we're talking about Sacsayhuaman in Cusco, which has got amazing walls. And again, this would go back to pre-Inca. Sacsayhuaman is pre-Inca. If you look at the building technology, this is where you can't put a piece of paper in between the huge stones that are unbelievable. This is pre-Inca. This is what my dad would say is Nephite technology. Okay. Now, what a lot of these people, non-LDS, will show you is that the Inca built on top of it, and their ability with stonework is much different. So when they layer on top of in how we're talking about the Nephi work with the pre-Inca work, you can tell the difference when it switches. But that wall, probably the one of the most famous is Sacsayhuaman. I don't know if I'm saying it right. When you visit there, they want you to say "sexy woman," but it's something close to that. You know, my brother-in-law went there for a tour, and you got beautiful, well-meaning people. Okay, and they're paid as tour guides. They're locals there. One, they say the Inca built it, and the Inca didn't build it. Two, he tells my brother-in-law that this place is a granary. Okay, you got the biggest walls in some of the world that no one knows the technology built them. You don't build walls like that for a granary. Okay, they're defensive walls. They're very close to what Moroni is described as building in the Book of Mormon. When the Spanish came, they had a hard time fighting to win in Cusco because of these walls until the Spanish brought out ladders, which was a technology that the pre-Inca weren't ready for. I mean that I'm sorry, that the Inca weren't ready for was the ladders to go. It's how they scaled the walls, but yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So I don't know if that's the wall, but there's amazing walls, and my dad would say they're Nephite work in the pre-Inca.
Yeah, and it's cool that they would maybe match up with what Captain Moroni was building
Yeah.
during that time. It's
Yeah,
very cool.
I just came to my mind a guy on YouTube, non-LDS. I think his name is Brian Forrester. He is a great. You YouTube him. He's got awesome things in that area in the Andes Mountains, talking about the pre-Inca. Okay, and if you watch that, I think anybody rational is going to come to the same conclusion. But that's my opinion.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to look them
Graham
up.
Hancock and Brian Forrester. I think that's his name.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. So you mentioned Cusco. Was Cusco possibly an important Nephite city?
My dad believed it was the city of Nephi. Cusco on the hill has a large tower. It was built by Noah. Uh, the tower stood until the Spanish brought it down. It was an amazing part. It's the same tower. I think it was Gideon was attacking Noah on and saw the Lamanites coming, and they stopped attack. So there's the footprint still. It's one of the videos we have on YouTube. It's very fascinating. There, it's Sacsayhuaman.
Interesting. And the city of Nephi, so like they would have landed where Lehi landed, then the city of Nephi that was a little further north, right? Because Nephi left that place. Is that
Yeah,
how it works
yeah.
in the Book of Mormon?
So landed in Chile. The Sea of Nephi is actually in Peru. But relatively they're close to each other.
Yeah,
But it's part of the northern. They keep moving north.
right.
if you read the scriptures, yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, so speaking of north, I wonder where do you think the Jaredites were? They usually are described as kind of being in the north.
My 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 dad would put them very close to I believe Ecuador.
Okay.
Um, and when we were going to talk about this, I get a subject. My dad had a rule going back to art, which was to follow the words of the Book of Mormon. So outside things that are interesting, he didn't divulge into it because the Book of Mormon isn't covering it. But what's fascinating about Ecuador, and we'll lead into some of the things that you and I will talk about a little bit later, is Father Crispy. I think it's Crispy, Crispi.
Hmm.
He was a Catholic father there around the turn of in the early 1900s, maybe late 1800s, but I think early 1900s. No, it's got to be in the early 1900s. Um, and he would buy from the locals a lot of things that they'd go into the tunnels and bring out. Now, I gotta say, I feel bad talking about this because I love the subject. I go into it deeply, okay. But my father, like I said, it's not supported by the Book of Mormon, so he's not going to talk about. But um, the Father Crispy had a museum full of the artifacts that they bring back, and they support a lot about the Jaredites. They support a lot about the Book of Mormon. Um, and there's a lot of mysteries around what happened to these items, where they went. Did the Catholics, melt down the gold with all the history on it and bring it back? But a lot of things were found: elephant tusks, pictures of elephants, pictures of horses, chariots. Um, and it's just fascinating. Some people will say some of it wasn't real. And on top of that, I hate to divulge too far, but the church actually set an expedition down close to there, and they got a few people. You can find it on YouTube. Very interesting story. When they get there, they can't meet the man they're trying to meet. And I'm paraphrasing the story a little bit. Forgive me, but someone
Okay.
says, "Hey, you should go see Father Crispy." So they go over to Father Crispy, and they have pictures of them holding these elephant tusks, these Egyptian-looking writings, and everything. And it's a fascinating story. They were sent by the church, and some of the people from BYU. And it's just fascinating. And that would support, a little bit about the Jaredites in the Book of Mormon there.
Wow.
So
So,
if that's a subject that could probably take three three podcasts to cover. A lot of these things you could do a whole podcast on, but yeah.
for sure, yeah. So, are you saying that those caves where they found these elephant tusks, that was in Ecuador?
Well, it was around that area.
Okay.
Gosh, man, I'm doing this from the top of my head on Father Crispy,
Yeah.
but it's north of Peru. And I think that's Ecuador. But I hate to give wrong information. If you give me a second, I'll just look at it real quick just to make sure.
Yeah, no, you're good.
But I mean, it burnt into my mind is what they found there, which is just so fascinating. A lot of people like to say it's not real. You look at it and tell me it's not real. I'm sure there's some things that were fake in there, but I don't think so.
Yeah, that is very interesting.
And like I want to stay true to my dad, and he wouldn't spend a lot of time on Father Crispy.
Yeah.
Christie, Ecuador. That's what I said, right?
Yeah,
Crespi. I'm sorry. Crespi is Crespi. Father Crespi. Fascinating story. You have to. Oh man, you have to look at it. You have to look at some of these things that they found.
for sure. Yeah, I'll have to look that up. So, maybe that covers the question about elephants and horses, but is there other evidence of horses and elephants being down there in
You
Ecuador?
know, there's very little evidence. I talked to my father about this, and he's like, Devin, it's one of the mysteries. There is very little evidence. Now, you look at one of the hard parts is when the Spanish come in, they start erasing everything that was non-Christian to them, and it's hard to know what was there. But see, what Father Crispy has, and this is why I get excited about it, it seems to be the stuff that was hidden and the Spanish didn't get to, and a lot of that had the horses and the tusks, and the tusks had carvings on them and stuff. Now, they could have been shipped there from a place where they had elephants, but I you know, I don't think so. Now, elephants have been found in tar pits, in pits there. So have horses. Now you carbon date it. They say this is long before Nephi was there. I don't know. Is there evidence? There is. Is there a lot of it? No. Is that part of the mystery? Yeah. I mean, my dad would just say, well, we haven't dug up every section and of everything there, and it'll come up. But there, if you look hard enough, there is. There, in Mesoamerica, there is a temple, and then on one of the where it comes together, the sharp part of the temple coming down, there's elephant tusks carved into it coming out the whole way down. Now, these people aren't supposed to have ever seen an elephant or anybody from that built the temples. So how did they know? You can't look at it and say it's anything but an elephant tusk. I mean, an elephant, not tusk. I'm sorry.
Trunk.
Elephant trunk. Yes. Sorry, it's an elephant trunk.
Yeah.
I remember once when I was kind of thinking, gosh, Joseph Smith talks about elephants in this area. And this is what happens to me. I know this is how the Spirit works through me, okay? But studying it, I found that temple, the pyramid, okay, with these carvings on it, and that was the answer I needed. But through things I've looked since then, I've found other things, in the tar pits and then in deep pits that they found in the Americas and stuff. But the word is that the book, if you read the books, the history books, it say the Spanish brought the horses.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. Yeah. It's always a hot topic with Book of Mormon is the horses. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
My dad was big and I was big on there's never going to be a sign that says Nephi was here, signed by him and with a picture taken. There's always going to be, you're going to have to always use a little bit of your there's truths, and sometimes they're a little bit hidden. You gotta hunt them down. Yep. But you're always going to have to use a little bit of your own faith in the matter. You're going to find things in both ways. But believe me, there is some things, if you look hard enough there, that make you go, how did that get here?
For sure. And like you were kind of saying, there's no way we could know all the history and dig up every fossil and all that. So
yeah.
Well, cool. So there's a scripture in the Book of Mormon that I've been thinking about recently, and it says something like, "We're on an isle of the sea," or something like that. And so, does this model support that scripture in any way? Like, were they living on an island?
So my dad believes that everything that's written in the Book of Mormon is true, and that every word is important, and every word has a meaning. And yes, they were on an isle in the sea. Now, in my dad's work, that would be mainly what's rising of the Andes Mountains was the land when Nephi and Lehi got there, especially west coast of South America to the Andes Mountains. After Christ's crucifixion, after 3 days of earthquakes, then the back part, Brazil and all that part rose out of the water. Land became ocean became land, valleys became mountains that are very high, of exceedingly height. Now, this is another one of those things, like my dad told me that he didn't build what we saw in Peru. I was kind of like, Dad, come on, man. The stuff wasn't underwater. And look, I'm in a couple years of college now, and I've taken high school, and there wasn't this. Well, my dad said, well, hey, was Darwin a big supporter of the church? And I said, no, he wasn't. So he gave me this little bit to read about Darwin. Well, Darwin went to right above La Serena in Chile, 13,000 feet, and then found a lot of what is evidence of the ocean being there, 13,000 feet. And then he talks and he believes that, now he thinks it happened over millions of years, that it was an act of God after the crucifixion, but that the east side of South America rose. And there's a lot of evidence of seashells. We're not talking about someone making a necklace from the shore and coming up. We're talking about fossilized in huge groups,
Okay.
and a lot of evidence of the ocean on the east side of the Andes Mountains. There's a seaport that's 13,000 feet high. And that's unfortunately, I don't know exactly where it is, but very fascinating things. Now, obviously, like if we followed modern science, their conclusions, I mean, I don't have a problem with science, but their conclusions, there probably is no God. And you and I, it sounds like we both believe that there's a God, which is Jesus Christ. So my dad thinks it happened in three days of earthquakes after the crucifixion, and science says it happens over millions of years. So.
Yeah. So just let's go back to that seaport.
Okay.
How
Okay.
high? How high did you say
I
that was?
think I think it's at 13,000 feet.
Oh wow.
The second highest mountain range I understand is the Andes. They are, I think, the Himalayas, 29,000, and at the top of Andes is 22. I think it's a 7,000 difference. It's the second highest mountain range in the world. Hopefully I'm right. I mean, I think I am. You've got another fascinating thing is Lake Titicaca, which is the highest navigatable lake in the world, is right there at the top of Peru in the Andes.
So is the lake also maybe evidence that the Andes are younger than geologists typically think?
The Lake Titicaca, I mean, you could do, I mean, there's books written about the place. It's very fascinating. But yeah, my dad would say that Lake Titicaca before the crucifixion is probably at ground level, and then after crucifixion is I don't know, 20,000 feet in the air. I don't quote me on the height, but it's very high.
Yeah, that's crazy. Wow.
I mean, there's scripture references for that, though. I mean, Samuel. Let's see, I wrote this down. Samuel recorded, and there shall be many places which are now called valleys, which shall become mountains, whose height is great. And that was in Helaman. And then it was said that during 3 hours earthquake, it'd be visible throughout the land of promise. Meaning, if you're sitting afterwards in the land of promise, you're seeing these mountains. Okay, they're there from where the valley became a mountain.
Wow. That is so interesting. Crazy to think about. Crazy to watch if you were alive to see something like that.
Oh yeah, I mean the destruction of that time is very fascinating. I mean they write a little bit of, I mean, it's not like they spent chapters and chapters on it, but they wrote about it. It was very fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. So does the South American model match at all those internal geography maps that BYU makes of the Book of Mormon?
My dad is, we love BYU. Three of my siblings went there. My brothers played baseball there. Love BYU, but my dad would not be a fan of the geography coming out of BYU. I mean, actually, the reason why he wrote his first book, Lehi Never Saw Mesoamerica, is because of when we grew up in the 80s and 90s, when I grew up, the only place that BYU talked about was Mesoamerica. And they still, from what I understand, have a very strong Mesoamerica focus. The Heartland theory has become really big in the last 10 years. I never, all the arguments we get on YouTube and all the negatives about the Heartland, nothing is about Mesoamerica. It's like that was just left. But my understanding is all the studies of BYU is still in the Mesoamerican. My dad's not a fan of any of those maps or any of that. And I mean, we can go into a couple of the details.
Yeah, I'm thinking of like the maps that they don't like try to necessarily place it in Mesoamerica, but it just like shows like where the cities would be relative to each other. Do you know if it matches at all?
Here's a spot where I'm going to have to just say it's probably in the 4,000 articles my dad has written, and I just haven't studied it.
Yeah.
and going back to, I wish I could spend a lot more time studying it, but I think when they say, hey, they landed and then they moved north, I think those maps are going to be correct. It's that the migrations and stuff. But where exactly on the map of the Americas it's put, I wouldn't put. I don't think that would be, my dad would agree with their accuracy on that.
Okay.
But if the scripture says they moved north, I bet the map moves north. I bet that matches up.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So you were mentioning the Heartland theory.
Hmm.
What kind of friction do you run into as far as the
Oh
Heartland theory
man,
goes?
we were talking about Joe Rogan. We don't want you to get canceled.
Yeah, don't let me get canceled.
I, I'm not a fan of the Heartland theory. And I gotta think of anybody that's gonna listen to you. 9 out of 10 probably are. So we wouldn't make any fans. But all the comments that I am defending are always from the Heartland theory. I mean, to talk. My dad, when he wrote his book, the first book of the 4-book series, If I Never Saw Mesoamerica, it's all about the South America and why the Mesoamerica is wrong. We really wanted to write another book about the South America compared to the Heartland, North American theory. And he just wasn't in the greatest health in the last while to just work on a book. He had to keep things kind of short, and it was just a lot of energy he didn't have. Mentally, he was very strong, but physically, it was a little weak. But a lot of his blog posts in the last 10 years are dealing with that. So if anybody wanted to read, there's a lot there. But the one thing, there's many things to discuss, okay? But the one that my dad would just say, look, this is a deal killer for me, is that the Great Lakes through the Heartland is one of the flattest areas in the United States. And I've been to the Great Lakes. My dad's been to the Great Lakes. It is one of the flattest places I've ever seen. I've been to California. I've been to Tennessee. I've been to Florida. I've been to New York. Okay. When I was on the Great Lakes, I didn't see a mountain anywhere by me when I was in that area. When we're talking about 3 days of earthquakes and them saying that the mountains were of great height, I don't think they were talking about hills. They weren't talking about the Appalachian Mountains that you can't see. They were talking about something right next to them. That would just be it for my father. I mean, it's the flattest part, and I agree with him. It's extremely flat. It doesn't. To me, it's gaslighting, because this does not match what I read. I've read the Book of Mormon twice myself, and I've studied a lot of this stuff afterwards. I get a very good picture of what they're describing, and it's not that area to me. But
Mhm.
I get a little passionate about it. But I say we don't want to get canceled because most people aren't going to appreciate that.
Gotcha. Yeah.
We go over a few other things, but
Yeah.
uh, I, in there, to get to, in their theory, to get to, they would have them landing usually in Florida. Some of them have them landing in Louisiana. I don't like to put words in people's mouths, but the scriptures are very, very explicit. If I remember that, it's on the west side. Okay, so they put it on the west side of the Florida Peninsula. Some people, I think, put it in the Louisiana area. But my dad would say that going around the Horn of Africa, I think it's the Horn, you call it the Horn of Africa, is not navigable by being blown before the wind. You'd have to have tacking. And
Okay.
that just that theory of them leaving and going the other way. Now, people will have a back and forth on this, but studying it, it's one of the most dangerous places. Now, it comes down to, though, could God can navigate Lehi or Nephi through anywhere, but it's a very hard place to navigate a wind blown before the wind around the Horn of Africa. And that's not where the tides and the wind goes in my dad's work. Then you wrote to me about Zelf.
Yeah.
And I added, well, you kind of said the plains of the Nephites is actually a statement from Joseph Smith to Emma in a letter. So
Mhm.
these are kind of all going into it. We're going over some of the most common things brought up.
Yeah.
But Zelph was a white Lamanite. Now, Zelph is, you could do a whole section an hour on him, but this is what's important. Zelph is a revelation from Joseph Smith, period, end of story. Okay, but it's said verbally to a group of men. Okay, 8 of those men write about it. Okay, and then not one is exactly the same to the other. So it's a little difficult, okay, because we've got a verbal revelation, and then we have 3 people, and some of the things that they say contradict themselves. Okay,
Mhm.
some people say it was a Nephite, some say it's a Lamanite, etc., etc. Now, my dad does many blogs on this. It goes into detail. All 8, I believe it was 8. It could have been 6, but of what people wrote afterwards. Some of them wrote a little while afterwards. Love the story. We love the story. It is a revelation from Joseph Smith, and we get this as if this means that Lehi landed. It has nothing to do with what Lehi landed. It doesn't say that this was the only area they were in. What it doesn't say is inferred by the Heartland. Now, remember, my dad's theory is with the northern migration and Hagoth's ships that the Lamanites did go into the north. Okay, so he never said there wouldn't be someone in the Heartland.
Yeah.
And but my problem is when I'm arguing, well, not arguing with, when I'm discussing with these people, they say that this statement about Zelph, it means a whole bunch of things that weren't said about it. It means where they landed, that they were only in this little area, that this is the land of promise, that no other place is the land of promise, and that's not said in that story anywhere. And so we've got no problem with that. Then the next one, to me, this is in my point of view, one of the strongest points for the Heartland theory is during this during this group's trek, Joseph writes to Emma. Now, I talked about Zelph being a revelation. Okay, when a prophet, my dad's very big on talking to me about what's prophecy and what's not. When a prophet writes a personal letter to his wife and doesn't declare that this is from the words of the God, this isn't a prophetic statement. This isn't it's a little hard to go back and look at it and say this was him saying the Lord told him that this is what was going on here. But he says that he, it, the way I read it, the way my dad reads it, he's romanticizing writing to a wife that he's been away from, he's far away from, and saying, I'm looking over this beautiful land. It's the land of the Nephites. Okay. Now,
Plains of the
again,
Nephites. Yeah.
plains of the Nephites. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Uh-huh.
So again, but this one I would say is not. We can't run a whole discussion on it because it's a letter to his wife. It's
Yeah.
what he wanted us to know. He usually put in writing, but it's a very strong statement for them. But again, my dad's not against saying that a Nephite reached North America. Okay, we don't know what happened with Hagoth's ships. We don't know where the northern migration stopped and when. But there's a lot of evidence. Joseph Smith, it's hard to know if he knew exactly where Lehi landed and what is exactly. This is a whole discussion itself. My dad would say that Joseph Smith didn't know, and we know he didn't know because he didn't tell us. I don't know. But what I do know is that there's a lot of evidence that he's general about where they've been, because some of the first books that had real pictures of the Mesoamerica were brought to Joseph Smith, and he said, yes, this is what I've been talking about. I'm paraphrasing. He didn't say, no. It was only on those plains of the Nephites that I was talking about on the trek.
Yeah.
He sees that. So in my understanding of that, it's very easy to say that this was all part of that, and it's supported by prophets afterwards and the things that they've said in general conference.
Interesting. Yeah. So I don't have necessarily a bias for where the Book of Mormon took place. Like I call
Mm-hmm.
myself an agnostic when it comes
Yeah.
to that. So I don't really, have like a dog in the fight or anything. But
Yeah.
um, I think the word plains of the Nephites might be, I don't know if like, is that a little clue? Like, is there anywhere in the Book of Mormon where it describes plains, or does it seem to describe more of like mountains and hills and stuff like that? Like, I'm just wondering. I don't know if you know the answer, but maybe
You know,
there.
I don't know if I'd be authority on that, but in the Book of Mormon, they're talking about mountains, definitely,
Yeah,
mountains of great height. But there's also they're talking about game. They've got to be talking about some flat areas. I mean, there's a lot of things. We can go into it. I mean, another aspect would be that the Native Americans, which we would my dad would say is the Lamanites in North America, the things that they built that the Heartland theorists or the North American theorists point to are mounds and wood structures. And to me, they don't match what I read in the Book of Mormon. And none of them have lasted the sense of time. They're all really not impressive to me compared to what is spoken about in the Book of Mormon. Now, it's interesting to me because we'll get someone that says, hey, they came from Jerusalem and look at this stick fort that the natives made and it's just like Jerusalem, and they'll show a picture of rock buildings in Jerusalem. I'm just like, I don't know where this has come from, but what I see in Jerusalem is very similar to what is in Peru, and the differences my dad would say was probably from when Nephi was taught how to build, not like the people before him. But it's a lot of it's out of, I mean, all of Jerusalem's out of stone that I've seen, and the I hate again to put words in people's mouths, but the Heartland theorists will say that their structures of the natives in that area is what matches, and I just, to me, that's gaslighting because it's not even close.
yeah, yeah. Super interesting.
I hope that answered your question. I'm not too sure if it did.
Yeah, no, yeah. I just like wonder if like maybe Zarahemla and those places were like in the mountains of the Nephites, and then North America was like the plains of the Nephites. Does that make sense? Like, I'm just wondering if maybe that's a possibility.
Yeah. Well, again, though, my dad would say, in juncture, thinking about this is fine, but what does the scripture say? And unfortunately, what you're asking me is I'm not I'm not super strong at.
Yeah,
But what I read in the Book of Mormon of a vast civilization between the Nephites and Lamanites matches what I see more in South America and Mesoamerica than the plains of the Americas.
right.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's my personal opinion. I've read it, and to me, it's not even close. Moroni, the forts he built, the descriptions in the Book of Mormon, they match the forts in Peru. Okay, they don't match the mound people or the other structures or the Hopis, and and people will say that it doesn't mention rock. It does mention a Moroni built out of rock, and there's also mention of forts where there was only one way to enter. Okay, and they've got amazing forts in Peru or in the Andes Mountains where there's only huge rock structures that you can't, like bigger than the castles in Europe, and there's a road leading, a walkway leading up, and it matches Moroni's description perfectly. So, I mean, look, this is, I'm being a little rough, and it probably is going to offend a lot of the people, but that's how I read the Book of Mormon. People, I don't know, I get a really clear picture, so that's what I got to go off of.
yeah. No, I think that's good. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the Heartland,
Mhm.
and I wonder if could you maybe expound a little bit more on the Mesoamerican model and why that one
Yeah,
doesn't quite fit what you think?
it's funny because in the last 10 years, I've never had a Mesoamerican question. Actually, most people argue that, hey, to my dad, you got to stop believing the South American and the Mesoamerican. It's in North America. The point is we don't believe in the Mesoamerican theory for where Lehi landed.
Hmm.
Um, my dad would say that he got ships probably populated Mesoamerica and Northern America, and the northern migration in the Book of Mormon populated that. But my going back to what got my dad into the study was the exact words. Okay, and there he's got a whole book. Nephi Never Saw Mesoamerica is all about why the Mesoamerican theory is not right. But the land that they put it in is not running north, south, east, and west the same as Nephi describes. The people I've read will say why Nephi was wrong. Okay, this is offensive to my father. It was very offensive to my father. A man that built a ship and navigated it across either the Pacific, if you want to be on their side of the Atlantic Ocean, didn't know north, south, east, west. He did, okay? And he felt that when we start changing the words that Joseph Smith did and what Nephi says, it was practically blasphemy. And so if you think of Mesoamerica going north-south, but really there's a part that goes this way, and that's where Nephi is on, okay?
Yeah.
And what a lot of them place him on. So now it's not a Mediterranean climate there. You don't have the cure for malaria there. You don't have what we haven't gotten into the cumin and coma. There's so many things that my dad would say aren't in Mesoamerica, does not fit. Now, in my dad's work though, Mesoamerica is way closer than the North American theory, but nothing fits every word of the scriptures in my dad's work as South America.
Okay.
And look, when my dad was showing me the stuff back when he was starting, I was kind of like skeptical. But my dad would show me where a Mesoamerican theorist, a very well-known one, would say, hey, Joseph Smith really didn't know horse. It was actually, because there's no horses in this area, it was actually a deer. And I was like, what the heck are they talking about? Joseph Smith, who rode horses when he's translating the Book of Mormon? Okay, that is the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life. But he shows me things over and over again where what the scriptures say are changed to fit up a area or land, and that's not how it should be. It should be what the scriptures are, the land fits.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, and you mentioned the east and west of the Mesoamerican. That's always kind of bothered me because, like, yeah, the Mesoamerican is kind of like a narrow neck, but it kind of runs east and west and not north and south, and for a lot of it. And so that's, yeah.
Hey, look,
eh,
we're talking about one. I mean, we're talking about some of the top ones I remember. My dad has a whole book about it. Probably about 600 pages. So
oh wow.
there's a lot more to it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. We'll encourage people to check that book out. Um, let's see. So I think you've mentioned in the outline here that Peru and Chile civilizations are older than the Mesoamerican civilizations. Can
Oh yeah, by
you?
far the oldest civilizations in the Americas is in Peru, Chile. All science I've ever read on this, it points out to that. So what the point of being on that is the migration in the scriptures is almost never south. It's almost
Mhm.
always north. So again, going back to the Heartland understanding, okay, the North American theory, the Great Lakes theory, I'm blending them all into one. And someone might say, hey, they're not the same, but what they love to talk about that area, but then they will just say magically what happened below that area happened. I mean, that is kind of an important part. The Central America, Mesoamerica, same thing. What about all the stuff that's going on in South America? I mean, what is that? Where did it come from? That to me, that's a big thing. It's not something my dad covers too often, but
Yeah, I mean that makes sense that chronologically it'd get younger settlements and stuff as you move north, and that seems to be what they find.
yeah.
That's
And
cool.
then also in support of Joseph Smith, that because science, which the 2008 mitochondrial DNA study is completely tears apart, they believe they came over to land bridge. So to understand them, when they came over from Asia over land bridge, they all hiked, I don't know, 4,000 miles down to Chile, set up camp, grew civilizations, and then started working their way up. Okay, to me that's ridiculous. Joe Smith obviously says that they landed coming from somewhere else, built a civilization, and then moved north, which is what the age of civilizations in the Americas show.
Yeah, Yeah, and I thought about that too. The way that the current models of science would say that those people came across that Bering Strait or whatever it's called, and then they would have gone all the way down to South America. That seems pretty far, but it's
So
super,
that's good.
yeah, super
Yeah,
interesting. So I want to ask you a little bit about the Hill Cumorah because that's always a hot topic, and I know that
yeah,
it's like a rabbit hole and we could talk about it forever. But what are just
yeah.
some
You know
quick
what? We
things?
skipped one thing though. We skipped one
Okay.
thing. I hate. I know you're leading, and I feel bad, but we had the two animals mentioned in the Book of Mormon.
Yes.
Um,
Sorry. Yes.
yeah, yeah. No. So I do want to talk about what you're talking about, but so my dad had. I'm going to butcher the names. The Kuman and the Kulian.
The Curulum and Cumum,
Yeah,
something
there
like
you
that.
go. Okay. And he places those as the alpaca and the llama in the Peruvian area. And if you understand and you study them, those are very important. The the Book of Mormon says that these animals were as important as the horse and the cow and the ox. Okay, and they say importance, they say the elephant and then those two items. Now,
Hmm.
my understanding, my dad's understanding is the reason why Joseph Smith didn't know the name. He knows the name of horses, he knows the name of the elephants. It's because it had to be an animal that he didn't know when he went to translate it.
Yeah.
And what he probably didn't know was that the North American theorists will say a lot of times we get a lot of animals, and as a North American farmer, I have a hard time thinking that Joseph Smith didn't know a couple of those animals.
Right.
So, but if you study the llama and the alpaca, very fascinating, very important to that area. They help to pull and they can be eat. They can use their wool for clothing. Very very important to their society.
Yeah. That's
Sorry,
cool.
man. I remembered that before we moved on. What
No,
was the next one you want to talk about?
I completely skipped over the two animals from the Book of Ether. So thanks for going
Yeah,
back to that. Because I'm always curious about that too. Every time I read it, I just wonder what are those things.
yeah.
So really cool. Yeah. So the I wanted to get it to the Hill Cumorah. And maybe
Okay.
you could just give us just a quick couple of things about it.
Yeah,
What
this
is?
is a,
Yeah. Sorry.
this
Go
was
ahead.
oh, okay. Go ahead. Finish your question. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Oh, I was just gonna just say like what? How does? What does your dad's theory say about the Hill Cumorah?
Okay, so this is a fascinating item here because I'm 44. My dad started this when I was in 1990. I would have been 13. So between I was 13 and 15. Okay, and I grew up just thinking, following the Mesoamerican theory because that's where all the pictures were in the Book of Mormon. You know, you go watch uh, the resurrection movie that they had. It's taking place there. I forget what that movie was. A great movie that they made.
The Testaments, or
Testaments, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, you know, it always looks kind of, I mean, it could be a South American look, but it's a little bit more of the Mesoamerican. And I always accepted the case that Moroni planted the the scriptures in the Hill Cumorah in New York up until about 4 or 5 years ago. I've been following my dad's work for a while, okay? And I come across this and I start the way we all understand it. And my dad goes, wait, you know, a lot of things that you're thinking aren't true. Now, my dad's position is he doesn't think it was the Hill Cumorah in New York that Moroni planted it, but in the sense he wasn't he wouldn't say it had to not be. It could be, but he was, you know, if he was a betting man, he would say 99% sure it wasn't. And there's a couple of reasons for that, but I thought this is again another thing that, hey, Dad, you're kind of in left field here. And he goes, Devin, did you know that Joseph Smith only said the word Cumorah in all the writings that we have one time? And I was like, no. I was like, he called it the Hill Cumorah. My dad said, no, he never called it the Hill Cumorah. And so I go on to Google and I start looking and I look and I look. I can find nothing. He finds the one thing. I'm going to paraphrase here. Okay, this is all from memory, but Joseph Smith says, "Good tidings from Cumorah, not Hill Cumorah." He says from Cumorah. Okay,
Hmm.
and it's the only thing he has found in all of his study in the last 30 years, and it's all I could find when I looked for it. Now, there's a lot of people saying things. Now, during his time, it was the the Gold Bible Hill, there's a lot of different names for it. Church lore took on the Hill Cumorah, I think for obvious reasons. Okay, but that was an eye opener to me. What I'm going to say is it's a very deep rabbit hole, and I'm still going down it on the Hill Cumorah. I find a lot of things are lore that we know about it and not the truth, and I'm interested in the truth. Okay, but I found a lot of fascinating things. Okay, they have a huge battle at the base of the Hill Cumorah with thousands of people. I mean, hundreds of thousands, the multiples of 100,000, I think. Okay, and it's got to be at least 100,000 die.
Yeah.
What I found when I was doing a lot of these searches, and my dad was like, hey, why don't you look into this, because I'm not too sure if it's what you think, that a lot of anti-Mormon groups actually use this against the church, because at the Hill Cumorah, I'll get people to tell me all the time they find bones and swords and stuff. No, they don't. Okay, that is not true. There is not evidence that a huge battle took place at the base of the New York Hill Cumorah. And so that was fascinating. Also, the understanding that of when they returned the Book of Mormon to the Hill Cumorah, well, what we call the Hill Cumorah, it's not going back up to where Joseph Smith pulled it out of the top. It goes into a room that opens up, and that room, I mean, I'm getting into a little kind of personal of reading it. I wasn't there. It's a little hard, but it seems like it's another dimension. I don't believe that is in the Hill Cumorah that we have now. I mean, it opens up there. But now this is personal. This is Devon DowDell, and I'm not a prophet, and no one should probably listen to me on this. But it's very same as when the prophet's in the St. George Temple, and he has the vision of the founding fathers. Okay, the room expands. Okay, I don't think physically the temple wood, I've been in that room and I've seen the wood actually physically expanded. To me, it's another dimension that's opening up right there. And I don't know if dimension is the right word, but when I read about how they put the Book of Mormon back in and that happening there, it kind of started changing my mind on, I don't know if it was, if Moroni physically got there. My dad believes it would have been in the northern side of the South America up to where the end of the Andes Mountains is where it would have took place. Now, there's some people in the church. I mean, there might be. I think there's some high people saying that the Hill Cumorah is the Hill Cumorah. I don't know. That's why it's not. It's a very difficult conversation. But again, I had a father that didn't believe that for the last 30 years, and until 5 years ago, I thought it was the same place in New York. Me personally, I've studied it more now, and I find it's a fascinating subject. A whole book could be written on this. I mean, books have been written. Multiple 1,000-page books can be written about the subject, and I think part of it just comes into, I don't know how to answer that one. I don't know. I definitely am probably not authority on it, but my eyes were opened up from what I was taught as a kid and what I've discovered as an adult studying it.
Yeah. And I think reading the Book of Mormon, it's pretty clear that like there was this huge battle at the Hill Cumorah, and then it seems like there's a bunch of records that are hidden there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I mean, I can see I think they call it the two Hill Cumorah theory or something, and
yeah,
it's a hot topic.
To me, when my dad was saying, well, they call it the Hill Cumorah and there's one in New York, it is a hot topic, and a lot of people won't like. And again, this is kind of my opinion, and a little bit on my dad definitely wasn't a strong believer in the New York theory for it. But I mean, the first thing that came to my mind when my dad started talking about this, I was like, man, we call Bountiful a place this name Bountiful 3 or 4 times. I mean, we've got Bountiful before they leave. We got Bountiful when they get to the land. We got Bountiful in Utah now. But so it's common for them to reuse it. Now, very fascinating though is when Joseph Smith says "good tidings from Cumorah." Again, we're getting back into Devon, into myself, and I'm not a prophet. So, but I started to wonder if Cumorah meant more than just is something, is a word that means something, and
Mm.
maybe on the celestial level. I don't know.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Never
Yeah,
thought of it that way.
yeah. Like
Yeah.
there's a few. I'm trying to think. What we say, like Hosanna. Just certain words mean something, and I got the sense when I read that quote from Joseph Smith that it means more than what we think it means.
Yeah. And I think it's an interesting and you pointed out something interesting that I'd never noticed, that he doesn't say good tidings from the hill Cumorah, but from just
From
Cumorah.
Cumorah.
So
Yeah,
yeah, that's very interesting. Maybe
it
it's
is, and I know I'm gonna make a lot of people mad, but just the if you know, it's very hard going to you go to all these classes, and the teachers, they have lives going on. For them to teach you about the Hill Cumorah in the deepest sense is very difficult. I would teach it in the more simplest sense, okay?
yeah.
But as an adult, us learning about Cumorah in the way we did when we were 12, it's very fascinating to do the deep dive into it, and it is a fascinating subject when you do that.
Yeah.
It's just how the nature is. I don't expect the mom and dads working all day getting their kids to be able to do a deep dive in Cumorah when they teach it to me when I'm 12, 13, 14, 15.
Right. Yeah. So if 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 the last battle, or where Moroni hid the gold plates was in South America, then how did they end up in New York?
Well, I mean, again, we're going a little bit into when I start reading about these things, but we don't know. My dad would probably say we don't know how they show up in New York, but there's hints. I mean, if you read the story of how the Book of Mormon's put back, I don't think it's still where it was, and I don't think it physically was inside that mountain once the door closed anymore. Now, some people might think that there's a vault that holds those things there, and I don't think. I think they're, I mean, for lack of a better word, in a different dimension that the God controls. Now, this again is we don't know, and I don't know how. I don't know how they move. Okay, but what I do know is there's a story, a well-documented story of Joseph Smith traveling, and they come across Moroni. When I say come across it, I don't even think they stopped to bother him. But the person says, "Should we help him?" He says, "No, it's Moroni moving the plates." Okay, and that's a well-documented story. So I don't know if we know all the ins and outs of how it moves and where it is and where it's kept.
So maybe it's possibly like an angelic thing, like maybe it was some miraculous.
Well, again, we're going to go into when I've read. I think it's Brigham Young's description of when it was put back into the
Uh-huh.
hill. It is and again, this is me, this is my spirit or whatever, but I don't physically, I don't, when that closed up, I don't think you could go dig in and find that room. I don't think it's there.
Right.
And all the items there. And
Yeah.
I just don't think they're physically there in our realm in that mountain. I think it's in another dimension. Now, again, this is me. This isn't, it is, I think my dad would agree with me on that. But an Alpha Omega God can do whatever he wants to do. But
Right.
if someone told me that they're physically in that room, in that, I would, if prophet said that he got a revelation, I'd say that's fine. But when I read it, no, I think it's one of the mysteries of God, and that is at work there.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think we got through most things. I
Yeah,
just wonder if you have any last words on the on this theory.
you know, it's good. We get asked all the time, like, is this important? And I hadn't heard my dad's response. My response was, no, this isn't important. Testimony of Jesus Christ is important. That's what's important, okay? And with that comes, in our church, a testimony of a true prophet, a testimony of Joseph Smith, okay? Now, studying this has given me the largest testimony of Joseph Smith, and so I found it of great value to me. For myself and for my dad, I can say studying it this way And reading, like when Joseph Smith is translating, every word has a meaning, and diving into it increases our testimony of the church of Joseph Smith, of Revelation, of our ancestors in the Book of Mormon and what they did for us. And so also to that point, yeah, I'll have people say, okay, well, I'm not interested in that. I've got testimony of Jesus Christ. And I'm like, hey, good job. That's great. And then 2 years later, they go, oh, hey, I heard something, and it shook my testimony. I'm leaving the church. Well, okay, in that case, then yes, you should have been learning some of the other ads, because there's an answer to a lot of the questions people are leaving over. If you stay in the realm of I love Jesus Christ and that's all I need, I'm okay with it. But when somebody says something to you that is outside of that realm and it shakes you to the core, then maybe you should be doing a little more studying. Maybe you should ask a few more questions, because there's a lot of answers out there. And I can say for me and my father, it's just, to me, I love the Book of Mormon, but getting something to hone in on, like where I landed, and reading into these scriptures has made our testimony grow. So that would be my, one of the things I'd leave there. And my dad had the biggest testimony of Joseph Smith, and all his heroes are in the Book of Mormon, and in those writings.
Yeah. Well said. I applaud anyone who's like really studying the Book of Mormon for any
Yeah.
reason, and like really trying to get truth from it. I think it's great. Well, Devin, thank you so much. I know that your father wrote some books and he's got a website. Could you tell people where to go to find those?
Yeah, my dad's work can be found at nephicode.com, and then they're also on Amazon. His flagship book is Nephi Never Saw Mesoamerica, but it's a 4-book series. It also talks about who built Mesoamerica. Is the second book, and so www.nephicode.com. He's got a blog with 4,000 articles that go into depth on almost every subject we've talked about here, and I've covered just the outside of it. If you want more of the scriptures on why and what is said, is nephicode.blogspot.com. For about 4,000 articles. His last one before his death on the 12th was written on the 6th, and it's about the hill Cumorah, and it leaves you in suspense with his death without it. So, but if you go searching, there's a lot on Cumorah in there.
Yeah.
Great resource. And then my wife and I own a website called www.barndoorhouse.com. If anybody's in Utah and they're looking for some farmhouse furniture, look us up.
Nice. You reminded me of a question I had about your
Yeah,
dad.
yeah,
You said 4,000 articles, and I heard that he was like cranking these out every day.
yeah.
How did he do that?
Well, and we're getting into you and I, like, we'd love to spend all day doing something like that. But my dad retired, so he started this in 1990. Then he retired in 2000. So for the first 10 years, he did this every day when he got home from work. And so we're talking, let's see, he was 85, so around 55. Retired at 65, and then did nothing. Well, that's not true. He built his house for my mom and him in Cedar City, Utah. I mean, when I say built it, they literally built it himself. But all of his time from them on, especially from 2010 on, is studying and writing about this. And it was his passion. And later on, when he was getting worse in health, his mind was always sharp, and getting up with the passion to do this probably kept him going a couple of years, when if he wasn't doing anything, it might have more melted away. I think with an older person, I don't know if you've ever seen this in your life, but when they have something that they are really passionate about and they're doing every day, it kind of seems that they keep going a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So, but for the last 20 years, he's pretty much just been writing articles.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing about your father's life and his work. And man, I've learned a lot. It's been a super fun discussion.
Yeah. Well, I hope all, because the amount of people in the church that like the South American theory, I've probably asked people I've met, where do you think it is? And I've had one person out of 1,000 say South America. Most of them in North America. I hope you don't get canceled. And to all the North American theorists, I'm sorry if it brings you closer to God, it brings you closer to the Book of Mormon, the better for you. Love you. You know, I just say I hope we all stick to the Book of Mormon instead of changing any of the words. But if you feel that works for you, then I'm glad it brings you closer.
Yeah, thank
But I
you.
don't want anybody to stop listening to you after this.
Yeah, here's to not getting canceled in 2022, huh?
Yeah.
Well, hey, thanks, Devin. That was awesome.
Oh, hey, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Ryan. I appreciate that the opportunity to come talk about my dad's work.
Hey guys, thanks for listening. Just a quick note at the end here. After we recorded, Devin contacted me with a little bit more about the theory that he forgot to mention. When we were talking about how Moroni could have gotten the plates to the hill in New York, Devin said the following to me in a text message. Quote, when Joseph Smith first sees the golden plates, his mind thinks for a second of their monetary value, and the plates disappear. Are they there, but invisible? Did an angel move them real fast? Did God transfer them to a different dimension? This goes to support that God can move them at will and in a way we can't understand. End quote. So there you go. Something more to think about in this theory. Guys, thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you next time.